Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, Elliot shares his winding path from majoring in mechanical engineering to breaking into management consulting at Accenture. Learn why he decided to go to Harvard Business School to break into private equity, but made one important pivot before enrolling. Listen to how he hustled during school to make his dream a reality, and why he ended up pivoting after a year to work in sales and strategy at Workday. There's some very important lessons in this episode about independent sponsors as a model to get into private equity or get that private equity experience, so pay attention and learn why he eventually ended up setting his own M&A advisory diligence business. Enjoy. All right, Elliot, welcome to the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited.
So it'd be awesome if you could just give the listeners a short summary of your bio.
Sure, absolutely. So I started my career in management consulting at Accenture. I then left and worked for a search fund here in Atlanta. I then went to business school at Harvard, got into the private equity world, worked at two different private equity firms, then started two of my own independent sponsor private equity firms after that. And now I run an M&A advisory firm focused on helping independent sponsors and acquisition entrepreneurs execute buyout transactions.
This is going to be a fun one. I love your background because it's different from what we typically see. It's a little more entrepreneurial. So I love it. So let's start all the way back actually at college. So you were at Morehouse, right?
Morehouse and Georgia Tech. They have a dual degree engineering program.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. Like, you know, mechanical engineering doesn't scream finance or consulting. No. So tell me, what was the thought process around doing engineering and, you know, why you ended up in consulting after that?
Sure. So sometimes they say you got it honestly. So both of my parents were financial consultants and accountants and CPAs. And so engineering was a great sort of undergrad major to have. But I think very soon when I got to tech and got into my major classes, I realized I was best at the intersection of having conversations with people and the quantitative analysis. And so if I didn't play my best hand, I knew I'd be in trouble. So that sort of encouraged me.
Doesn't mechanical engineering just mess up your GPA though? Or you did really well, so I guess not.
Yes. So
or your social life isn't like mech-y, like one of the hardest majors out there.
I wear my Georgia Tech hoodie like I was going to war in it. I mean, it really does have that kind of disposition. But I would say ME was difficult. And so part of my process through everything that I've done, you'll start to hear this again and again, is learning how to craft your story in the language that you want to tell it.
Got it. Okay. So you did this dual kind of program with Morehouse and Georgia Tech, graduated in Mech-y. Tell me about like did you do internships like your junior year, like typically like a consulting internship, and tell me how you kind of stumbled upon management consulting. It sounds like your parents were in it, so they kind of maybe pushed you in that direction.
To some degree, they weren't in management consulting, more just regular consulting. My parents were kind of old school, Chicago and Detroit. I did 5 different internships. So I was in school for 5.5 years between the 2 undergrad degrees, 2 bachelor's degrees. And so I interned with Procter & Gamble, Johnson Controls, CH2M Hill Engineering Company, Accenture, where I ended up starting my career, General Motors, and a plant that's here that's no longer in operation. And so I had a really good opportunity to sort of try my hand at different things. I think your listeners will probably be interested because I've used your site many times. Part of my cheat code was just to get those 2 to 3 month opportunities to see if I liked something. So I had 5 of those before I ever graduated from college.
Yeah, that's super useful. You're also a little older when you graduate. So It's like you're a little more mature. You kind of know what you want. So, but then I guess by junior year or by your 4th year summer, did you kind of know, or had you found that thing? Like, what was your thought process in terms of, was Accenture like that summer before you graduated?
Accenture was 2 years before I graduated. I got lucky in that I worked at Accenture on the technology consulting side. I remember telling my recruiter I would not be interested in consulting on the technology side, but if they had an opportunity in strategy, I'd be interested. They did not recruit from Morehouse or Georgia Tech for strategy. They had like 5 schools they recruited from. However, they did allow interns from previous years to interview for their strategy practice. And so that's how I got hooked up. And then I ended up having my full-time job offer a year and a half before I graduated. So I did an internship after I actually already had my full-time offer with Accenture.
Got it. Okay, so you already had, so you were kind of set, and you were able to actually maybe enjoy yourself at the end of your college years, I hope.
Yes, I even called Accenture and asked them, hey, so I'm in school now. Is there a certain GPA I have to keep my job offering? Because I actually have an ability to change it now. At the end of the day, I can't. So please don't surprise me.
That's funny. That's what they're like. They're like, just don't completely bomb. Is that what they basically told you?
Essentially, they couldn't tell you anything specific, but they kind of gave me don't completely bomb. Yeah.
Okay. That's fair enough. So you're starting at Accenture. Tell me how that transition was coming out of school. And well, just before we even jump there, a little bit about school life. So you said it was a dual degree, 5 years. What did you do first? Was it like you were going back and forth, or like what was the last one?
So it was Morehouse and then Georgia Tech. So the program is amazing. Think about a liberal arts college, HBCU, Morehouse College, the school that Martin Luther King went to, and then Georgia Tech, the top 5, and ME and top 3 mechanical engineering program.
Yeah, amazing.
So I started at Morehouse and I finished a full degree in 3 years, and then transitioned to Georgia Tech, and I was sort of halfway through my engineering curriculum, and then finished an engineering degree. That transition was hard as nails. Anybody who's gone from a liberal arts college to a top 5 institution of technology knows that it's a Mike Tyson punch to the gut. But so is life. So it kind of prepared me for a lot of things thereafter. Transition was tough. I actually pledged a fraternity at Georgia Tech, and I think that kind of helped balance me, honestly. And at a certain point, to be fair, it was get out of school with your degree and a decent GPA and sort of leverage it to go do what you want to do after. So I wasn't A+ Georgia Tech guy. I was getting out with the job Georgia Tech guy.
And that's fair. I think a lot of people are happy to have a job if they, especially in this market, right? Coming out of school. So, okay. So you were graduating what year?
2006. I graduated December 2006.
Before all the shit hit the fan. Okay. So,
yes.
So you got the job, you're working at Accenture, you are in strategy where you want to be.
Yes. Yep.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about why strategy. Why did you kind of want that? Was it just like the more prestigious role? Was it because it had a better trajectory long term? And how did you even know that?
So I probably should have mentioned, so one of the things that I did while I was in undergrad is I attended the Harvard Summer Ventures and Management program at Harvard Business School. And so I had like a 1-week view of business school at Harvard. So I had a sense that I wanted to go, and I knew that, as investment banking was one of the more clear pathways at that time, strategy consulting was the other. So I kind of had a sense that this was in the wheelhouse of where I wanted to go. So that was one of the reasons why. Another reason, in kind of the transition question you had, it's interesting coming from engineering to business because I had not taken a true business class when I started at Accenture. So I was heavy quant, knew my math, but like return on assets, return on investment, reading 10Ks, none of it. And so I had to really get up to speed on that quickly. And for my fellow sort of technical folks that get into business careers and feel a little out of water, I remember asking some of my higher ups sort of help me understand, like balance sheet stuff. So when we were in 2008 and all the shit hit the fan, and now we have to do cash flow management for people and not profit improvement. And now you have to do balance sheet math and not income statement. I remember asking people sort of, how do you calculate cash flow off of this balance sheet, blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, the math's too complicated. You're learning in business school. And I was like, who's lying to me? I'm a mathematician. If you can't understand and explain something to me that's mathematical, somebody's lying. So that was a great sort of additional push to go to business school.
Got it. Okay. So is that kind of when did you go right after Accenture? I'm looking at your LinkedIn right now, trying to get the sheet.
Yep.
So you went from 07 to 09 at Accenture, and then that's when you went into HBS?
That's it. Yep.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about your time there. What was it like? Was it eye-opening? Was it great? Did you love it? Or what was the deal coming out?
Loved it. I also, particularly for this audience, I knew probably beginning of 2009 that I wanted to get into private equity. And so I got the advice that I should quit my job early and try to get an internship in the industry. So it's not on my LinkedIn, but I actually quit Accenture early in June and did an internship with the search fund launched by an HBS guy here in Atlanta.
Before you went to HBS?
Exactly, which
which
was
was
sort of my
smart.
hunting license to go
You get
talk to
the
people about jobs.
pre-MBA private equity experience. So talk for the listeners that don't really understand what a search fund is. Explain to them kind of just real quick
It's a
how they
single
should think of it.
entity private equity instrument. So private equity firms like Blackstone are buying companies all the time. Imagine a entrepreneur who wants to go buy a single company and run it, as opposed to just buying it and being an advisor. So they're typically people fresh out of business school or sort of younger in their career that raise 2 years of salary to go search for a company and then use those same equity investors to fill the equity part of their transaction to then go buy a company, hopefully grow the company over 5 to 10 years, sell it, and get a return that way.
Yeah, and so typically so people can think of a search fund. Just adding to that, is almost like a mini private equity fund that's an independent to one person. So the GP, the general partner, kind of running it is just this young kid that's sharp and smart and wants to go take a new business, buy it, and ideally triple it in size or quadruple it in size.
That's it.
And okay, so is that typical, like in terms of size, like for a search fund, it can typically be a company under like $1 million revenue all the way up to like 5 million revenue, depending on how big of investors you have behind you, right?
Exactly, what you choose to do. I think my company was about $1 million in EBITDA, so a little bit over $5 million in revenue at the time.
And how did you? So that internship, that was the internship that you helped actually close that deal, or you helped work on it?
I helped do an acquisition screen for an add-on they were looking to do.
Okay.
They didn't end up consummating it, but sort of I looked at the industry and found 50 companies that could have been decent targets for an add-on. Pulled what information I could out of the internet. Called CEOs, cold called, all that kind of stuff.
So that was just good experience to list on the resume. So because you knew once you went to HBS, in order to try and break into PE, having that it was super important.
Exactly. And the HBS guy who I was working for was an advocate. And so, of course, they made sure I was doing things that could be helpful.
Yeah, all the listeners out there that say, I want to go private equity, if you don't do something like this before business school, it makes your life infinitely harder. I've had about 2 guests on this podcast that have managed to break into private equity from investment banking post MBA with no PE background. But I can tell you, it is super, super, super rare because there's so few seats for post MBA. I would even say, even if you have a search fund on your belt, you're still going up against guys and gals that have like 2 to 3 to 4 years of pre-MBA, direct investing experience. So you're still at a disadvantage. But okay, so you got that on your resume. It was smart. You did that for what, 6 months?
Actually more like 4. It was short.
Okay. And then you ended up enrolling at HBS. And then tell me how the recruiting went. Right off the get-go, you started kind of networking. What was the
2 answers to that? So first off, I was so naive. I read this book, The GlowCap Guide on How to Get a Job in Private Equity. So I knew it was going to be tough, but I actually thought that the private equity firms that the people at HBS landed in would all come to be part of the official hiring process at HBS. So I remember talking to a person next to me who was ex-Bain Cap, like, hey, when's Bain Cap coming? When's Bain Cap coming? And then probably a month and a half, 2 months into school, she told me, hey, look, Bain Cap's been here. We've all given recommendations on who we think would be great. You didn't make the recommendation list. Most of the private equity stuff is informal and they're not posting it publicly. And I was like, whoa. So it was kind of welcome to the jungle 2 months into business school. And then I just sort of got on the phone. I mean, I probably called 100 people my first year and 150 people my second year to try to find one single internship. And fortunately, through calling and then a local firm here in Atlanta that I chased down pretty aggressively during Christmas break, was able to sort of close them soon after Christmas break. So it was a grueling process, one that was kind of wrought with the surprise of they're not going through the official process.
You were able to close them for an internship after your first year around the Christmas break, you said?
Yep, I came home to Atlanta, call it, December 15th before Christmas.
And you're stressing out because everyone has internships lined up and you're like, I got to get in this, if I'm not doing banking. Did you consider going banking to try and potentially? No?
No, I knew in my heart that at that time, so I came into school with all the Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers folks that got kicked out, so 2008. So there were 300 people with better experience than me in business school, and people hadn't transitioned from investment banking post MBA into private equity in like 3 or 4 years. And I could see it in LinkedIn. So I said, if I didn't get in right out of business school, then I had to sort of make a complete career change, but it didn't make sense. I hadn't seen anybody in 4 years go post MBA, investment banking, and then PE.
Yeah, it's super rare, like I said earlier. So, okay, so you scrapped, you were able to kind of get this private equity internship down in Atlanta. How big was the fund? Was it a small fund, another search fund? What was it?
No, $300 million industrial private equity firm
Great.
started by Links Partners is the name of the firm.
Uh-huh.
I love Links Partners. Second generation investor started it, Babette Hennigan. Um, Incredible people. Non-paid internship, which I think you have to be ready to do if you really want to get into the industry. I did so well. I got well, at the time, huge, at now pretty small bonus check and an umbrella. I still have that umbrella 10 years later in my car because I earned it.
You earned that umbrella. Yeah. So, do you mind sharing what the bonus check was at the end of the summer?
5,000 big dollars.
Nice. Nice. So
Yes.
put that into context of like, so you only earned $5,000 over the summer. Some of your classmates earned what, like
30,000
60,000,
bucks.
30,000, something like that. Crazy. Yeah.
60,000 bucks, depending. I mean, I was
In
living
banking.
in one of my fraternity brothers' basements and driving a 20-year-old Honda with no air conditioning in Atlanta.
Nice. Oh, that's
Anybody
nice.
who's lived in the South and knows the summers like.
Reminds me when I was in New Orleans with no AC in
Yes.
the car. I have a lot of family down in New Orleans. Oh, sorry,
Yes.
my phone just went off. But so, okay, so this is great. So you get that internship though,
Mhm.
and the type of experience you're doing, you're just screening companies. Did you actually do any deals? I know it was only in the summer, but
So I got lucky again. So I didn't do any deals, but I was able to work on a sort of due diligence process and a post LOI transaction for a trucking company they were looking at buying in South Carolina. The deal didn't consummate, but of course, being in diligence is far more close to the actual action than just screening companies. And so I was,
because you're
I
running a
guess you could say,
process. You're running a process.
essentially, yeah. Fortunately, there were other processes going on, so I got a chance to actually lead the one that I was working on,
That's awesome.
and it was just a complete crash course. I mean, I would get there before everybody, do my best to keep up, stay after everybody left, and then call my Wall Street guys that had already been doing PE to get like a lifeline from like 7 to 7:30 whenever I could catch them.
What is this quality earnings bullshit? What is this? What is this other thing? What is it? Like, yeah, I can.
What IRR is reasonable? Oh my God, this thing is all over the place. Why is the balance sheet not balancing? How do I do this? How do I present this 10-tab model in 2 minutes to a 50-year-old second generation investor? Yeah, I needed a lot of help.
Yeah, stressful. So did you, okay, so you had that, you go back to school, and then did they say to you, hey, maybe you can come back after school and come full time, or there's no seats for you?
There was no seats. And in all fairness, and the managing director at the time said, hey, you're not ready yet. I mean, in all fairness, the people who are investment banking are way better at modeling than you at this point. You need to sit down with some investment bankers and really sort of improve that. And I'm glad that she was honest with me about that because, I spent the time my second year doing that.
Cool. And then but how did you end up you did end up landing another PE gig, right?
I did. So
how did you end up doing that? I mean, you had the internship, but it's still the odds are stacked against you with the other banking kids or pre-MBA.
I called more people than my competition by far. If I showed you my list of 250 people that told me no, you'd laugh. But I was on the phone. I didn't do any of the McKinsey, any of the Goldman recruiting. Okay. I was Alumni Network on the phone. Can I work for you? No. Who can I work for? Can I work for you? No. Who should I talk to? Can I work for you? How could I work for you? What kind of, have you ever seen anybody hire someone who hadn't been pre-MBA? How does anybody get into this? And finally, what happened is through those calls, an advocate, another Morehouse alum who was working at Windjammer Partners at the time, sent me a requisition for a job that was sent to the Harvard alumni, Harvard Business School Alumni Network, for a full-time position at the Watermill Group in Boston. And it was sort of January of my second year. And I called him and said, hey, look, don't you want the best candidate, not the best one available now? It's my last semester at HBS. I mean, gosh, I could work 30 hours a week now. And then in May, I can work full time. I think this is better for you to do this than kind of pick some whoever person who can do it now. I mean, it's a 3-month difference. And so I was able to convince them to start me. I started February 1, my second year, like that final semester.
So you start working 30 hours a week, everyone else is partying, having their full-time gigs lined up, and you're
hustling is what I was doing. I mean, there's no way to say no to something like that. I was hoping for one opportunity. I got one. Okay. I could have signed it as soon as they sent it. Yes.
So you convinced them to let you kind of do a project, but it's still just a project. It wasn't a full-time offer, right?
No, I signed a full-time job offer in February of my final year. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you were partying a little bit, no, but you had to actually start working. with them?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I bare minimally viable party. I mean, I was learning private equity at a real full-time firm while finishing school.
That's
It was
crazy.
just a lot. Again, it was a lot.
Yeah, you were learning a lot probably in those 6 months or whatever, those 5 months. So yeah, I see it here, January. So you were there for a year. For a year. So tell me a little bit about why only a year. Like you'd worked so hard to get into private equity. Were you still kind of didn't feel like you were up to speed on the modeling, or did you feel like, hey, you were there at that point? What
No,
happened so that you would jump, work so hard through business school only to jump to, it looks like a strategy role?
yeah. So this is sort of the other piece of life, right? Sometimes absolute money grab is not the only thing that's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up in Michigan. I had moved my mother and my brother down to Atlanta after undergrad, after some messy stuff personally I won't get into here.
Mm-hmm.
And so after business school, after going to the number one business school in the world, I'm a 2.5 hour plane ride from the people I love. And it felt like I was, what they call hustling backwards. Like, to your point, you work as hard as you can, you do all this amazing stuff. And now am I looking at a 5-year career in Boston and I can only see my family like once every 2 months? And then my mom's asking me, hey, you moved me to Atlanta, you're going to move me to Boston?
Yeah.
So I made a decision at that point to come back to Atlanta and sort of figure out how to keep my career going. It wasn't easy. Atlanta is not a financial center.
Meaning you wanted to be down close to family. You wanted to be in the Southeast.
That's it.
And you said, okay, it's got to be Atlanta. So you started looking at companies and opportunities down there. And that's when kind of the position at Workday came along. And how did you find that? Just through just talking to alum and stuff like that? And it was just a natural fit?
Yeah. And in fairness, some of the stuff that's not on my LinkedIn, and I'm giving this to the audience because I think your folks will appreciate this particularly. I came back to Atlanta. I did a quick stint at Home Depot. Didn't work. I was leaving Home Depot and was working with a mentor of mine that was one of the 250 calls I had at HBS, showing them deals. So I was showing them deals and just, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? I had my Holland Capital one-pager going to mezzanine lenders trying to figure it out. And then I was on the Harvard Business School Alumni Network and saw this Workday job. I didn't know what Workday was. Most people didn't at that time, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I had an interview with them and I asked, the final question was, can I work remotely? Like, yeah, the whole job is remote. I was like, whoa, yes, sign me up. Because I knew if I had a remote job, I could still do my deal stuff. So I actually bootstrapped the first 3 years of Ellsworth Partners, working a full-time job at Workday while I was spending 40 to 50 hours with my mentor / business partner on Ellsworth Partners. So I actually did those.
That's amazing. So so you were like, it's a remote. So the Workday position, which you were there for 3 years, that was a fully remote position, even though they're based in Atlanta.
So they're based actually in Pleasanton, California.
But you were based here. I was based in
Atlanta. But at the time, I was on a 6-person team of sort of sales ops people doing business cases for their sales force. I covered everything from New York to Houston. So it was all about getting to where they were selling. And so very little sales were happening in Atlanta. So it was just every week or every 2 weeks, I was on a plane going somewhere to talk to, whoever about Workday software. And then, I'd wake up at 4:00 in the morning, run my models, go do the sales meeting at 8, talk to the people.
But explain to that a little bit. So explain to people, the listeners. So I think you said it in your intro, kind of the bio, but this job was remote and you're still having to fly places, give pitches, trying to close these software deals basically.
Mm-hmm.
But during that whole time, you were bootstrapping your own business.
Yes.
So explain what that business exactly was and why. So it was from an alum, one of the 250 people you had kind of made a connection with at HBS. You had kind of partnered with him or her, but explain how that even took.
Yeah. So for everyone here, if you want to get a job in private equity, one of the easiest way to do it is to start showing people deals. Like, stop asking for a job, go find a deal on BizBuySell or BizQuest or something and show it to somebody. So that's what I was doing.
At where? BizBuySell,
BizQuest. I mean, there's hundreds of deal listing sites, but business brokers list deals. Go find one that you like and go show it to a deal person.
Okay.
So what ended up happening is right around the time I started at Workday, the exercise for 3 or 4 months showing a mentor deals, he said, hey, I actually like this. We should work together and formalize this. So we started an independent sponsor company called Ellsworth Partners, where him and I looked at deals between $2 and $8 million in EBITDA. industrial stuff, kind of similar to what I did at Watermill, looking to do those deals as independent sponsors. So private equity groups without a dedicated fund, you raise capital while you're in diligence. So I did that while I was doing the Workday job.
How do you even do that? Like independent sponsor, it's a big thing now. These independent sponsors, like it's very common now for people coming out of HBS, Wharton, wherever the top schools, be like, I'm going to go buy my own business. Right. But like, don't you need to know the right people that have those big pockets?
So that was the thing, and why it was important for me to work with somebody who had already been doing it. So my business partner and mentor was a guy who had worked at a $1 billion firm for 8 years, and then had been out for 15 years doing independent deals. So he had the relationships, he had the how to get stuff done, he had the tutelage, and I just needed the.
So he had basically the contacts that were ready to pony up whatever, $5 million, $10, $20 million, whatever you guys needed to get the deal done.
Right.
Got it. Okay. And so how, I would assume the power dynamics of that, though, when you're making a deal with him, he's bringing a lot of value to the table.
Yes.
Whereas you're like, yeah, you're doing a lot of the work and the grind, but like, tell me a little bit about that, like negotiation. Because he's like, let's formalize it. But then was he like, okay, yeah, you get 5% of the upside, or like you get 2% of the upside? What was that like?
So it was nice and then a bit messy too. So I think he was a great, well-intentioned guy. And so he said, the only partnership that I understand is 50-50. Otherwise, it's not really a partnership, and it's a dictatorship to an extent, or sort of big partner, little partner. Yeah. And so our operating agreement was 50-50, although the negotiations weren't, right? So we did what he wanted to do, but in our operating agreement, we were 50-50. So what did that mean? It meant I was learning as an apprentice. We really did split the work about 50-50. Okay. So people think I was looking at deals and he was running models and raising capital, It was really just 50-50 in everything. And so I think his purpose was both to get deals done and to teach me how to get deals done, which I think is sort of part of the apprenticeship model. And again, there was no salary, right? So he wasn't paying me. I was offering work for the opportunity to help him get deals done. And so that was sort of the arrangement that we had.
But when you got did you get a deal done with him?
Sure. We did 2 or 3 deals, add-ons into his portfolio. We got close on a couple of platform acquisitions and just didn't get a platform acquisition over the finish line. So
what were those, like, how big were those acquisitions?
They were like $500,000 to $1.2 million in EBITDA.
Okay.
Mainly in the tow truck industry. That's where one of the bigger portfolio companies was.
And then when you guys would acquire those businesses, did you actually do a lot of operational stuff to help them and go in there and get your hands dirty? Or were you just, hey, tuck them into your portfolio and you have a team, or what was that like?
We were very hands-on, particularly at the beginning. When you buy a company that's under $1 million or at $1 million of EBITDA, you're typically not buying much in process, not buying much in systems, not buying much in terms of financial infrastructure. And so you end up having to sort of be the stuff that you need in the company until the company can afford the stuff itself, where you can integrate it with the mothership.
Yep.
So, the role that we were playing was not just advisor, but actually, I was interim CFO at some of those companies. I was running some of the financial reporting for the lenders. You just kind of get in there and get done what you need to get done.
Oh, okay. So you were partners with him for about 3 years. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yep.
And then, so tell me how, like, when and what transitioned, or what was going on? Were you thinking, hey, I want to do this myself? Or were you thinking, hey, I really need this salary, this is not paying the bills? What was going on?
So about 3 years into it, we hadn't got a platform acquisition done. And so
platform meaning like big enough, like a big enough, like, anchor.
Yeah, and one that I could own the equity in the mothership, right? So the add-on acquisitions, because of him owning the company already, the part that I owned was so small because it was all the risk was beaten out. We were getting debt to finish those acquisitions, not equity. And so the ownership that I had was very, very, very small.
Yeah.
When you're working sort of in a bootstrap way and you're younger in your career, you have to get stuff done. Like, you can't work for free and sort of pontificate about deals. So what I sort of realized is that my partner was effectively semi-retired, right? Like, he was in his 50s going on 60s. He had already kind of done the personal guarantee stuff. And when you do a deal, you think about owing somebody $20 or $30 million, and now you have a board that's kicking your butt and sort of your freedom gets restricted again. I just don't think it was all that appetizing to him unless it was sort of a perfect type deal. And so
there was a little bit of a conflict around, like, he didn't necessarily want to do the same types of deals that you were ready to go.
Exactly.
And he's like, oh, why are we going to rock the boat here? He's like,
Exactly.
this isn't a slam dunk. And you're like, well, we can work on it and make it a slam dunk. I get it.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
So there's a little bit of that. Well, that makes sense. There's like a generational thing. Like, you're ready to go. He's like, it's got to be perfect. And so I can
Right.
see there's some tension there, even though he was giving you 50-50 of that.
Yeah. And in all honesty, looking back on it, part of what I was looking to do was to be an independent sponsor. And I think part of the beauty of that model is that you don't have to do things, right? You're not forced to put capital to work. And so you could say tension, but it was also sort of, I learned sort of the flexibility of the independent sponsor model through the fact that, he was in his 50s and effectively retired. He didn't have to, he didn't owe anybody a significant enough amount of money where he couldn't go spend 3 weeks with his wife. And that was kind of the life that I wanted to.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about kind of how you thought about your transit and then the next transition.
Sure. So I still wanted to work on deals. I just needed sort of the freedom to do it without a partner that was semi-retired. Yeah. So I spun out and started Spartan Capital, which was my own instrument to go do deals about the same size. I looked at some stuff that was sort of under 2 million. So I'd look at stuff that was $700,000-$800,000 in EBITDA.
Yeah.
But it was essentially the similar thesis to.
And those, for the listeners, those companies that are doing about 700K of EBITDA, they typically go for like a little bit of a compressed multiple, right?
Yeah, typically 3 times, and typically there's sort of at least 30% seller financing. So effectively, a little over 2 times.
A little over 2 times. You got to come up with a little over 2 times capital. So if it's a 700K, it's 2.1 million deal, but you're only really having to come up with 1.4 or 1.5. Yeah. Okay. So tell me a little bit about who you knew. Did you have enough contacts at that point where you could help with the financing, or did you have? I mean, I don't think you had $1 million saved in the bank at that point, right?
No, I was flush with relationships and opportunity. I mean, I had a database of probably 200-300 mezzanine lenders, 400 or 500 senior lenders, a bunch of family offices and sort of high net worths that did deals. I mean, I inherited my business partner's database because we used it. It was in our CRM. So I had called the same people, pitched the same deals. Yeah. I was a known entity, not 30 years known, but I wasn't I wasn't the newest kid on the block either. So I leveraged those relationships to take a run at a couple of things. The main industry I was looking at the time was durable medical equipment. So people who distribute like wheelchairs, CPAP, PPAP machines. So sort of healthcare equipment for older people, typically who are taking care of themselves in their home. And, in fairness, I had about 2 years of runway and kind of took a run at a pretty big deal sort of near the 1 year mark, and the deal blew up. And so
why? It's very common for deals to blow up, but why did this one blow up? Or can you share?
Absolutely. So I had equity guys that were fraternity brothers of mine from tech that were sort of older than I was. And one of their mentors was the owner of a business in a similar industry. Ooh. And so we were sort of leveraging him to be sort of an advisor and sort of help us with the transaction. And what I didn't realize at the time was that one of the reasons he was a mentor of one of my buddies was because he was getting business from my buddy's company. And so he actually had no interest, when I really think about it, in creating an economic instrument significant enough for my buddy to leave his day job. And so my equity guy's mentor blew the deal up in like a sign of, like, it was a weird kind of torpedo kind of way. And I was kind of left pretty extended. I'll say it that way. So paying for diligence yourself.
What's that?
Paying for diligence yourself.
Yeah. So you're kind of at this stage, and tell me kind of what the next kind of, so you're here, it's like what? And now you're 2017, 18? Mm-hmm.
2017. I kind of went to the drawing board, honestly, Pat, and said, hey, look, I have these amazing skills that I want to use in the marketplace. The independent sponsor thing has not worked out for me yet. So, do you want to keep beating a door down or try to figure something else out? How do you sort of play your hand in the market? And what I decided to do was to start a boutique M&A advisory firm, helping other independent sponsors and acquisition entrepreneurs, which are just probably less informed independent sponsors, arguably, and sometimes career people who want to go buy a company, helping them execute transactions. I mean, I knew good and darn well how difficult it was to find good advisors for deals $1 million to $4 or $5 million in EBITDA. I knew how intense it got as a sponsor trying to manage a portfolio company, have 10 deals in your pipeline, 2 of which you have LOIs on. And I also realized that most of the other people who were selling these services were selling them, I think, ineffectively. So like a buy side person on a 7-person investment bank on the sell side that never felt trustworthy to me. And they also weren't using sort of digital means to market. So I saw an opportunity to sort of own M&A advisory and digital marketing. And so I went off to start Guardian Due Diligence, which is the company I own and run currently.
And so you started that one?
2017.
Okay, so it's been a good 3 years. Tell me how that, I mean, it's always hard starting a new business, but tell me about like the trajectory of getting clients and how that's been. I mean, you obviously you had a lot of contacts through all the lenders and all stuff. Are they feeding you deals as an advisor? Are they recommending you? How are you actually? And you said, hey, there's an opportunity around digital. Like, you mean like social media, LinkedIn? What are you doing to generate? You're getting on podcasts like this, but what else?
Sure. No. So the first 2 years, it was all word of mouth from people who I knew. So it was independent sponsors or Harvard Business School friends who had companies that were looking to do add-ons. It was all sort of, 5-10 year relationships initially, right? And most times when you start a company, that's where you start.
How do you even make, like, what's the fee structure look like for such small deals? Like, I know you're obviously not making the same as like a investment bank that's doing a $200 million deal or $300 million deal. But if it's like a $5 million business, or let's easy numbers, a $10 million acquisition.
Sure.
And you're the main M&A advisor for that, what would the fee?
So it all depends on what you negotiate. Arguably, when you start a company, you sort of negotiate probably a little bit less than you would, 10 years in. Yeah. So on the low end, you sort of, at least the way I structured it was a retainer, just kind of cover my downside and my hours.
Yep.
And then a success fee that looked like a Lehman formula if the deal closed.
Yeah.
So it gave me sort of a steady coupon and then some upside opportunity for closed stuff. Because, during diligence, people aren't going to pay you for 80 hours a week, right? So you kind of have to give yourself some ability to get upside on that. And then what was interesting is that there's a lot more work to do on smaller deals because there's no like Harris Williams Investment Bank or Goldman Sachs or Bank of America showing you some 100-page book with like, 400 pages in a data room. It's like, 2 tax returns and a one-page.
They're like, what data room? Here's like 10 documents. Go figure it out, right?
Exactly. And so you price it almost like you're consulting, and then you have the deal kicker on the Lehman formula, and then you try to sort of.
And what is that kicker? I mean, maybe you don't want to share your pricing here, but like a range. So like retainer would be like what, 10K a month, 5K a month, something like that, just to keep you
somewhere in between there. And then, the Lehman formula on a 5K, deal can be, over $100,000.
Yeah. On a success fee. Yeah. Very cool. And so you kind of, a lot of word of mouth for a couple of years. And then how else are you marketing yourself? I love to hear the hustle. I love to hear entrepreneurial stuff because you talked about social media and it's obviously a huge opportunity. Are you putting out stuff on yourself? Are you doing YouTube? What are you doing?
Yeah. So I started taking digital marketing classes a couple of years ago.
Nice.
8 years.
You're going to have to share some secrets.
Go to work like anything else. I mean, the funny part is we all know how to do it for deals or investment banking or whatever, right? So we read volumes of stuff. Anything that you want to get good at, in my mind, you go read the people who are smart about it. What are they saying? What are they putting out? I think, in the next 10, 20, 30 years of this, there's going to be a lot more digital connections driving business than golf courses and expensive lunches. And so if you get good at sort of managing a digital marketing platform, which is your LinkedIn, which is your website and AdWords, which is your email marketing, which is all of these things. I had to go back to like marketing 101 from business school and
tell me about tell me about the thought process. Let's talk a little bit entrepreneurial startups and all that stuff. I think it's fun. Sure. And I obviously know that world now after 14 years of running this.
Yes,
beast.
You do.
It's funny because people think the reach is really big. Wall Street always says the business is really small. So, as much as we've done a great job in terms of building community and stuff, we're still working our ways up to grow the business. But in terms of, I'd love to hear your thought process in terms of what you thought of building your personal brand versus building the due diligence brand, the Guardian, right?
Due diligence. Yeah.
Guardian due diligence.
So brand. I knew it was very hard to sell businesses with your last name in them.
Yeah.
And so I learned that with my first Holland Capital thing several years ago.
So the thought process is if I grow this to a big enough advisory fund, I could potentially sell it down the road.
I can sell it. I can bring on partners. I can collaborate. I can sort of be a face that doesn't do any work. I have optionality.
Yeah.
If it's Holland, diligence services or Holland and partners, then people want to see Elliot every single time. Yeah. And that business doesn't scale. Yeah. So that was my first thought is don't put your name in it. The second thought is, what is the hardest part of executing deals, right? And it's diligence. It's which deal should you do, which deal should you leave, and how much time should you spend on any particular deal. That's the crux. The great investors beat down diligence better than the mediocre ones. And the ones that are just starting don't even know that that's the thing. And so my thought was, look, start with due diligence, because people are going to be troubled with it. It's hard. It's complex enough to sort of bite it off and solve it for people. And then over time, you'll become sort of a more comprehensive investment bank of sorts on the buy side, as people sort of need you for more things. So that was my thought process when I started.
Very cool. So a lot of little twists and turns there throughout your career. Tell me a little bit about just like your life. Are you like still grinding 80-hour week? Like, what are you doing now that's your own thing? I mean, it's your own thing, so it probably doesn't hurt, but as much as it did before. But tell me a little bit about like just how you've balanced all this stuff, because there's been a lot of kind of twists and turns. You've worked for other people, you've worked for the larger software startups, you kind of run the game and the consulting firm. So tell me a little bit about like how that's progressed.
Sure. So, for the first 8 years out of business school, it was absolutely a grind. I was working as hard as anybody on Wall Street, maybe piecing together 2 or 3 things at a time, but sort of definitely putting in hours. And part of this was to enable myself to put in hours if I wanted to, but not have to. And so right now I can do as many deals as I want to, but I don't have to do every deal that comes. I don't have to work with every customer that comes. There's a lot of jerks in finance, as we all know. I don't have to work for them or with them.
That's good.
It's a high enough service business, with a high enough margin that there's enough juice for the sort of the squeeze. And then there's strategic, client relationships that sort of matter. And so I'm able to manage a way more healthy sort of work environment now. That's good. And get to know a lot of great investors and sort of industry participants as well.
Very cool. It sounds like a fun ride, and I'll be watching to see how it grows. But is anything else you want to share with the listeners in terms of where they can find you, or any sort of final words of wisdom, that you've learned kind of coming through your path?
I'll leave one word of wisdom, and then I'll share where you can find me. Sure. I think when I got to business school, it was sort of the quintessential time in my career where I had to either put up or shut up. I'm in line behind 300 people that had already been on Wall Street in a private equity or investment banking capacity. And the fancy Harvard thing wasn't going to put me to the top of the line. And I think for a lot of people who find themselves just not on the A path, right? Because you can't sort of, if you're at, Pitt and you want to get into private equity, you can't sort of all of a sudden go to Yale, right? The way you beat this thing is you work harder than the other people doing the stuff that they don't want to do. People don't like getting on the phone. They don't like cold calling. They don't like emailing. They don't like managing a CRM full of people. They don't like hearing no. They don't like going and finding deals and then giving them to people essentially for free to get a job. If you can do those things, you can win. And people will tell you that's a waste of time and you don't need to do that. You can just apply. Good luck. But I'll tell you, the people that get my attention right away are the people who are already hustling, showing me value when they start. So I think that's sort of my words of wisdom I would embark upon anyone listening. In terms of how to find me, guardianduediligence.com, DUE, of course. And then LinkedIn, Elliot Holland, pretty easy to find there. I'm very responsive in both places. And so
it's 2 L's and 2 T's.
2 L's, 2 T's. And then actually you can also find me on elliot-holland.com. So ELLIOTT-Holland, HOLLAND.com. And my emails and phone numbers are there. And I'd love to speak with you.
Awesome. Well, Elliot, thanks so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom.
Patrick, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, Patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. And until next time.